My first introduction to the death penalty was as a child. I think I was 8 years old. I've recently looked up the date of when Omar Pinson murdered our local state trooper in Hood River, Oregon. My father was the elected prosecuting attorney at the time, and I remember him. I can still see him standing in the kitchen, leaning a bit on the counter and talking with mother as she was preparing dinner. And he was saying, I just don't feel good about the death penalty, and it's my job to seek it. And I think that my political survival is dependent on my seeking the death penalty. Cut. I just cut off a nice big burp, and I want to get rid of that. Okay, resume. You might call this take two, I guess. My involvement with the death penalty. When I was around 7 years old, or perhaps 8, a man, a career criminal who was driving around with a small moving van and burglarizing houses, was intersected by our local state trooper with a bunch of stolen shotguns in his truck. And as the trooper talked with him, he said, I think we need to go down to the police station and check the serial numbers on these guns. I'm not comfortable with your telling me you're just moving them for someone. And Mr. Pinson, Omar Pinson, then handed an armload of the guns to the trooper, being cooperative, and pulled the gun out with the trooper standing there cradling his guns and shot him in the throat. Trooper then crawled down on his hands and knees by the time he got to the police station less than a block away and bled to death there at the door. Well, my dad was on a fishing trip in eastern Oregon, and he came to a roadblock with the police there. And he got out and he said, what's going on? And they told him, well, Rondo, the local state troopers, have been killed, and we think the killer is coming this way. And as they said that, down the road, here came a car at a great rate of speed, and he burst right through the roadblock, and one of the troopers pulled his pistol out and took a shot at him, and my dad then grabbed the pistol away from him and shot at him. And when the guy wrecked the car and they arrested him a few minutes later, hiding in some boxcars, they looked in the car, and sure enough, my dad had shattered the review mirror. The bullet had gone right past the killer's ear and shattered the review mirror, which in those days, those cars had mirrors about this big. So anyway, my dad had to handle the trial, and I went to the trial, and I happened to be there at the moment my dad was doing a closing argument and saying, going into elaborate detail about what premeditation was. And I don't know if I've got the time to tell that whole story, but he said the guy was out there the day before fishing season with all of his gear and casting, and the game warden comes along and says, I'm going to arrest you for fishing out of season. The guy said, oh no, I'm not fishing out of season, I'm only practicing. And so he says, that's what this guy's doing. So, oh no, I didn't premeditate, I didn't really mean to do this. And I thought it was kind of a fishy story at the time, but that's the story my dad was telling. The jury found the guy guilty of murder, but refused to say they wanted to impose the death penalty. It was discovered later in talking to the jurors that one woman on the jury just said he looked like such a nice young man. And he did look kind of nice. He had wavy black hair, and he was only 34 years old, I think. So I experienced early in life my dad feeling uncomfortable about the death penalty, but going for it because he felt it was his duty, his constitutional duty, to enforce the laws, and we had the death penalty on the books. Well, over the years, the death penalty was repealed after a woman named Jeanette Freeman threw her 2 babies off a bridge in eastern Oregon because they were in the way, so the story went, of her relationship with her lesbian lover. The people of Oregon were aghast that a woman would be executed. They just did not believe a woman should suffer the death penalty. Wonderful days. There's something to be said for the chivalry with which we approached women in those days. But they repealed it. Well, later, when I was running in the legislature, there was another effort to reimpose it. And it had gone back and forth over the years, some with the Supreme Court saying it wasn't properly written and blah, blah. But it was on the ballot in 1983, I think it was. And we all knew it was probably going to pass as a ballot measure, which it did in 1984, the same year that I ran for election the third time as a state senator and put in my campaign literature and told people on the doorstep I opposed the death penalty. It passed by 64%, I believe it was, in spite of that, but it didn't get me thrown out of office. Well, we went to a meeting of what was called Town Hall on Channel 2, which was every Sunday, and there was a very smart lawyer named Jack Faust, who, they were a series of people that did this, but he was doing it at that time, and he cooked it up to go down to the Oregon State Penitentiary and go on, I believe it was called Cell Block B, where most of the people who'd been convicted of murder were residing. And we sat in a group, probably 20 civilians, and Jack Faust arranged with the prison warden, and they brought one convicted murderer after another, maybe a total of 4 in an hour, and we visited with them. Jack Faust asked them questions, get to know you a little better. Didn't ask the hardest questions, but asked them, let the audience and the TV viewers be up close and personal with somebody that's been convicted of murder and might have gotten the death penalty if it had been available. At the end of that, we were there, and Jack Faust turned to a young woman named Dee Dee Strike, who was the Joan of Arc of the death penalty at that time. She was campaigning around the state, and she was a nice-looking woman, and she dressed beautifully with flowing blue dresses. And he said to her, well, Dee Dee, after talking with these people for most of an hour, how do you feel about them and the death penalty? And she says, well, they don't seem to be all that bad. Maybe they could be rehabilitated. But I'm sure there are a lot of other people that we haven't talked with that do deserve the death penalty. And they were passing the microphone around, but me with my loud voice, I jumped up and I said, but these are the people that would get the death penalty if we had it. These are the ones. And oh my God, Jack Faust got all dithered, but I'd gotten him. I nailed him. Still passed by 64%, but I did my duty, and when I ran for election, I put it in my campaign literature that I was against the death penalty, and I went out and campaigned on it, and they invited me to come and talk, debate with somebody on Channel 8, which I did, and I still got elected. If you stand up for what you believe, the voters, anyway, I won't go on and on philosophically here, but that's sort of my story about Jan Wyers and the death penalty.